the stage.
Hello. Thank you all for coming out. You'll be pleased to know I'm leading you into lunch, so when I'm done, we all get to eat. So I hope someone's keeping an eye on the time for me. But what I'm here to talk about is how we can build a mass movement that has the power and the potential to change the world. And this isn't just rhetoric, this is a genuine project and strategy we're working on, and it's something that all of us need to be part of if we want to secure true, meaningful, and lasting change. Now, I want to start with a question. I've done this a few times before, so bear with it if you've seen this before, but I think we do get some interesting feedback off this. I'm going to go over here because the podium is distracting. So the question is, can you put your hand up if you would describe yourself as an activist? Cool, that's a good chunk of people. That's nice to see. I am an activist. As described earlier, I'm a player with a megaphone, still, as I always have been. I like to cause annoyance. That's my preferred type of activism, but there's all kinds available. We've heard about a lot today. I'm sure we'll hear about a lot more. But what I really want to know from the people who put your hands up, can you put your hand back up if you're happy to share with us very quickly how you became an activist? Not the why, but the how you became an activist. I can see a couple of hands. Shall I just run out to someone? You're the nearest. I'm going to run out to you. What's your name, sorry?
Hi, I'm Aria.
Hello. How did you become an activist?
Well, I didn't have anybody speak to me about the importance of activism, or anybody in my life who was an activist or vegan for ethical reasons until not long ago. But I feel like if I did, it would have happened sooner. So I came to this conclusion on my own somehow throughout the time frame that I was exploring veganism for what it really is. It just, in the past, I felt like I could never do it because I'm so sensitive, very much of a crybaby, really. And then this idea was coming closer to me, and at one point I joined a Facebook group of Anonymous for the Voiceless back in Poland, but it was not any near actually intending to come to one of these events. But it was, this idea was coming closer to me that I ought to do something. Although I didn't understand it at all, I would never think of the impact that I would be making when I do it. And then I became part of a vegan community, and then I started to meet activists, and one time an activist told me there's an event tomorrow, do you want to come? And I was like, yes, I just needed that extra push, and I feel like there's a lot of people on the edge there who just don't realize how important it is, and we can help them realize. Because, on the spot, the amount of difference I have made, and I'll keep pushing even when it gets hard, because it's my duty.
Thank you, and this is exactly what I was hoping to hear. It's a beautiful story, and it's a powerful one. I think it's one that probably resonates with a lot of us. I'm not going to make my terrible joke again. I've made it too many times, but having talked to so many people at events like this, out on the street, in 25 years of activism, all of us pretty much, not everyone, but all of us pretty much have the same pathway into activism. Just like you. Generally there's a trigger event, something happens that horrifies us. We didn't get into that with you necessarily, but often there's something that makes us start thinking this, and you certainly alluded to that. But so many people, we've talked about just now we were hearing about the footage and stuff that we all see all the time on social media, on the internet. So many people are exposed to this. So many people have that trigger moment, but don't become activists. And the people that do become activists, almost every single one of us, is because someone or something acts as a signpost to our activism. For you, it was this Facebook group, this local community you joined. For other people, maybe it'd be a social media account, maybe it'd be an activist or something else we see online. But there's nearly always a guide that takes us from the trigger moment to our activism. And for me, for sure, it was a very similar thing. I was triggered when I was 9 years old. I had made friends with a pig at a petting zoo. I then found out the petting zoo was attached to a slaughterhouse and a butcher's shop. And I saw the dead pigs inside, just like the one I'd made friends with outside. That was my trigger. But it wasn't until I met my local animal rights group that I became an activist, because I needed someone to guide me. Even though we can come to these thoughts on our own, almost all the time, we need someone to guide us. And what that tells me is that we need to make sure that every single one of us can act as a guide. We need as many of these guides into activism as possible. And to be truly effective, each of these guides, or many of these guides, need to be able to cover whatever the trigger moment is for people, whether it's a pig in a slaughterhouse, or whether it's a greyhound dying on a greyhound track, whether it's an animal on a fur farm, whether it's a racing horse, whether it's a duck on a foie gras farm, whatever the trigger moment is, we need to be there as a community that welcomes them in and allows them to express their outrage and their protest and become effective in fighting whatever that trigger moment is. And when we create a community that allows that, with a vegan basis to that community, we will find that these activists join us, and we grow, we recruit, and we start having that potential for change. Now, I'm going to get a little bit more into this because that's a little bit vague. So I'm going to take us back in time. So I've been active for 25 years. When I got involved, there was an estimated, I think, 300 local community-led groups, not chapters of national organizations, but fully autonomous local groups that decided what kind of activism they wanted to do, what kind of causes they wanted to champion or protest against, how they wanted to do that. They would often work together. They would often join together behind national campaigns, either in support of a national NGO or a national grassroots campaign. And so this was my local group some 15 years or more before I was born. This was Dorset Animal Action back in the 1970s, protesting against the local hunt at their Boxing Day meet. They were part, as I say, of a much wider network, but everything this group did, they decided what, when, how. And so when I became involved in the late 1990s, this was what I inherited. And it was a diverse group. Unfortunately, over the years, the police have taken a lot of my photos, so I don't have very many. I've tried to show a bit of the diversity of activism we were engaged in, though, as best I could. We would regularly sabotage the local hunts, at least once a week during the hunting season. We would protest outside of companies connected to animal research. We would protest outside companies connected to animal agriculture. We would do direct action, publicity stunts. We would decide how we did these protests. We would make our own banners. We would make our own placards. If we wanted to climb on a roof, we'd climb on a roof. If we wanted to disrupt something, we would disrupt something. And we did all of this in our local community, but as part of something much bigger. And this kind of organizing, it creates autonomy within the individual. It makes us step into our power to start achieving change through our own thoughts, our own actions. But it also creates these communities within our local community. And from those communities, we can recruit, we can grow, and we can build to something quite incredible. So this is 1992. This was World Day for Animals in Laboratories in 1992. And it attracted 23,000 people. And those people came from these local communities, from these 300 plus local grassroots groups. So it really shows that within this community model, we have a real potential for mass mobilization. Who would love to see 23,000 people marching again? But it's not just the numbers, it's also the impact. We can have the genuine change we can have through this kind of organizing. And I have some of the successes of our movement, or victories, or at least perceived victories of our movement from the last decade or so. And each of these, every single one, was brought about by grassroots pressure. It's brought about by these local groups shifting public opinion, the Overton window, to the point that NGOs can come in and secure those lasting legislative changes. So, for example, testing on animals, testing on great apes, both banned in the UK in 1997, both due to public pressure, which was created really by this street-level outreach protest organizing. We have dolphinariums banned in the early 90s, following the attempted liberation of Rocky the dolphin. By the Animal Liberation Front. It was a failed action. It was an incredible piece of our history. But some people tried to liberate Rocky the dolphin, one of the last dolphins in the UK. They were unfortunately foiled while they were trying to do it, but the publicity it generated created a national grassroots campaign to end dolphinariums in the UK, which eventually was supported by Born Free and others, and they secured the liberation of Rocky and the end of dolphinaria in the UK. We have fur farming, banned 2001, as a direct result of pressure from grassroots protests and Animal Liberation Front direct action, driving that industry to a point where they were very willing to accept a government payout to end it. That was pushed through by Compassion and Well Farming, so an unlikely and unplanned collaboration between the Animal Liberation Front and the welfare section of our movement. But it does show that if we work together, whether it's deliberately or not, we can have huge impacts. Fox hunting, well, you're doing better in Scotland than we are in England, but let's hope it's gone soon. We do have a ban, kind of. Wild animals in circuses, again, this was decades of protest, street-level protests, of big tops being cut down and pulled to the ground, of one of my friends back in the 80s had a bucket of elephant piss thrown over him by a clown on a protest. But these protests really shifted public opinion to the point that it was almost unthinkable to have wild animals in circuses, and then groups like Freedom for Animals were able to come in very recently and secure, finally, this ban on wild animals in circuses, and exactly the same with live exports of farmed animals. We saw, again, back in the 90s, the Battle of Brightlingsea, where thousands of local residents came out and physically stopped live transport lorries from getting on ferries. They would get boats and block the ferries. And we even saw the tragic murder of Jill Phipps, who was run over by a live export lorry at Coventry Airport. And that is the legacy of our movement. When we have these grassroots campaigns, pushing and pushing at a street level, pushing and pushing through direct action, through protest, through pressure, through community organizing, we create the conditions in which we can secure meaningful change. So, I'm going to go back one. So, another quick question for everyone, and this isn't a hand-raising thing, this is just something I want you all to think about just for a moment, is just what has happened in your local community for the furthering of animal liberation, animal freedom, over the last 4 years? What has been achieved in your towns, your cities, in your country, and in your counties over the last 4 years? Because this is the movement I inherited. And in 2003, myself, my best friend Nicola, we set up our own local community organization, the Southern Animal Rights Coalition. We set that up in 2003. We ran until 2007, when we were quite violently arrested for a campaign that you can read all about in my book, shameless plug. So we ran for 4 years. And so having thought about what's happened in your area over the last 4 years, I want to quickly run through what we did down on the South Coast between 2003, 2007, 2 full-time unpaid activists and a handful of volunteers supporting us. We helped the liberation of 700 mice from Wickham Laboratories and exposed cosmetic Botox testing on mice. We liberated 9 goats from a military research facility. We exposed the tests. We had the tests suspended and then ended. And all the remaining goats we had rehomed, and the laboratory is now abandoned. And those tests have ended permanently. We removed foie gras and fur from Portsmouth, Southampton, and Bournemouth. We closed down at least 3 intensive chicken farms. We emptied a puppy factory or puppy farm and liberated all the animals and closed down the puppy farm and the associated pet shop. We closed down our local greyhound track. We co-founded or helped launch the Lobster Liberation Front, and we helped with the reintroduction of wild boar back into the UK. And while all those things for sure deserve a round of applause, what I want to be very clear about is there's nothing special about any of us other than we just wanted to secure change. There's nothing that is different between me, between Nikki, between anyone who helped with this than there is between any of you. Any of you could do this, I promise you. And what I want you just to have in the back of your mind for now, for the rest of the day, is based on this. What change could you see in your local community over the next 4 years? So this is something that has bothered me for a while. I did end up going to prison for animal rights activism. Again, shameless plug, read all about it in my book. But since I've been out of prison, the movement has changed a lot. We've lost this grassroots network. And so, I've stepped into a very different movement than the one I grew up in. And this has kind of bothered me for a long time, is that for all the incredible activism we're seeing now, there's some incredible things happening. There's some things that we would never have dreamt of 20 years ago. But it's felt to me like the movement is missing its foundations, that all the organizations that exist, all the activism that exists is happening over a void where there should be a thriving grassroots. If we want 100,000 people to sign a petition, how much easier if we already have 100,000 activists across the UK? If we want a mass disruption of the McDonald's supply chain, how much easier if we already have this thriving network? Whatever it is we're trying to do, whether it's outreach, hunt sabotage, whether it's liberations or protests or anything else, it all becomes so much easier and more effective if we have a strong, resilient community model. And I've told people this for many years, and people kept telling me that that's not the world we live in. People don't want this anymore. People are focused on their strategies, in their silos, doing their thing, and it didn't sit right. So me and again Nikki, we decided we would get together in our local community down in Dorset on the south coast, specifically in Bournemouth. We got together all the local organisers of We the Free, of Animal Save, Animal Rising, Plant-Based Treaty, the local hunt saboteurs, the local vegan anarchists, local sanctuary organisers, local restaurateurs, everyone locally that had a stake in animal freedom within our community. This isn't that meeting, this is a meeting we had later, but we got everyone together for a public meeting. We had about 40 people, I think, come to our first meeting. And when we went around the room and got people to introduce themselves, it became very quickly clear there was so much happening just within Bournemouth, this little seaside town on the south coast. But most of the activists locally didn't even know it was happening, because everyone was focused on their own thing. And so we made these meetings a regular thing. We created not a new local group, but a local community where every single activist could come and take part in that community. They didn't have to change what they were doing. If people were doing We the Free, they could carry on doing We the Free. If people were hunt sabbing, they could carry on hunt sabbing, but they were doing it knowing they were part of something much bigger. That when the hunt saboteurs managed to get a successful prosecution against the hunt, the outreach activists felt that that was part of their community doing it. When there were stickers and fly posting happening all around town, everyone felt that that was their community being represented. When we've secured victories against the local sea life centre, everyone is part of that, whether they have stepped foot outside that place or inside that place or not. And it's proven incredibly effective. After that first meeting, there was a bunch of things that happened that I just quickly want to highlight. This was just over a year ago now, and it's still going strong. But straight after that meeting, the first thing that we saw was that every single local chapter of every national organisation, whether it was SAVE, whether it was We the Free, Plant-Based Treaty, Plant-Based Councils, Hunt Saboteurs, every single one of them saw an increase in numbers. I will say there's not many people in the Hunt Sab photo, not because lots of Sabs aren't going out down there, but because Hunt Sabs are terrible at taking photos. And so that was a huge thing. What we showed was that in doing this, we're not diluting anyone's activism. We're not taking from any group. What we're doing is creating a system and a community in which people are recruiting for each other. So if We the Free pull in 10 new volunteers, those people can find their place within this without necessarily losing those activists themselves. Everyone saw an upsurge in numbers. Everyone locally is doing more activism, not less. The next big thing we saw was that we were one of, if not the first group, to start doing physical protests in support of the MBR Suppliers campaign. If you don't know about this campaign, it's aiming to close down the UK's only puppy factory farm that breeds dogs for the research industry, 2,000 dogs a year. because of the protest we started down in Bournemouth, the only facility we have, the only supplier, so that it's a pressure campaign where the pressure is put on the suppliers of this company to join a boycott with the aim that when they have no suppliers left, they have no company. Incredibly effective. I'll say a little bit more on that briefly in a minute. But the only supplier we had in Bournemouth was Stericycle, who collect the clinical waste from MBR, which includes dogs that are bled to death to sell their blood and organs to research. So we started doing these protests. Again, we're getting good numbers on these protests. We're getting media. We're doing all kinds of different protests. We've done office occupations. We've done whatever I'm doing there. Street theater type stuff, chalking. Everyone has a place. If people don't feel comfortable with the more confrontational or assertive protests, they can stand with a placard. They can hand out leaflets. They can film it. There's roles for everyone. But what that meant was that people across the country started seeing what we were doing, how inspiring these protests looked, how exciting they looked. And people started copying them, so that Stericycle then became the national focus of this campaign, which was never the intention of the campaign. But it happened because people were just inspired by what we were doing at the only site we had down there. And so as a result, every single Stericycle facility in the UK now goes into complete lockdown if a single person shows up outside their gates, any of their facilities, because of what we've been doing down here, with mostly this, climbing on their roofs. But it's incredibly effective. It's really inspired people. It's really given momentum to that campaign, which has now kicked off nationally. And I had news yesterday from an industry insider that MBR ARCS, who currently have no gas supply, because no gas suppliers will visit them. They have no toilets because the septic tank company has stopped servicing them. Their office are half finished and half built because no one will finish them. And apparently they are currently barely existing as a company. They've essentially stopped existing as a functioning company. They're now just in complete crisis mode, trying to work out if they can stay open. So this is incredibly effective, and this is all off the back of that meeting. And the third thing that happened that is super exciting for me was that we encouraged at this meeting people to think about whether there's any campaigns they want to start. Not ones they want to join, but ones they want to start. And one guy was super inspired to go out that Saturday because of this conversation we had with a placard on his own saying, close down the local oceanarium. The next week, he was on his own again. The third week, someone went and joined him. And the fourth week, that person brought their girlfriend and their brother. And then within a month or so, a couple of months, we had 18 to 20 people fairly regularly through last summer stood outside this place. And on top of that, there's now a pressure campaign to get the oceanarium closed down. There's a petition for the council to revoke their license because we've uncovered a lot of dodgy things in their inspection reports. We've snuck in undercover and got photos. We're planning all kinds of things as well. We've written to every local school and every local hotel to get them to cut their support. So all of that just came back because this one person wanted to step into their power through this, and it shows the power that we can have with local organizing. Obviously, our aim is to close down the oceanarium, but we've already got one step along our journey to that. A big goal is they've removed all fish from their menu and replaced it all with labeled plant-based options. So they're already clearly listening to us and worried about us and trying to make us go away. But obviously, we're going to close them down. And then, there's one more thing. The direct action down south increased as well. We saw 70 chicks liberated off the back of a lorry on the way to a slaughterhouse. A lot of windy nights in the countryside, knocking down shooting platforms. Turkeys liberated last Christmas, and again, more wind at pheasant estates. And so a lot of people told us that this was all happening because of me and Nikki's background with SARC, the knowledge we had, we brought that in. This is all us. This couldn't happen anywhere else. There's something in the water down in Bournemouth. 100 different reasons this can only happen in Bournemouth, and we didn't buy it. So we went across to the next town, Southampton. I apologize. I imagine the geography knowledge of the south coast of England isn't that. I'm as far away as I could be, but Southampton is one town along. It's a different county over. So we went there. We had a conversation with a few different people that we thought had potential to maybe organize something like this. All of them new activists. And Yeah, we just inspired them by basically what I've just said now about our vision for a mass movement in Dorset. They were inspired. They started organizing themselves. We've been there to give them support as they need it. But generally, this is, we've stepped back and let them do this. And so as a result, we'll come back to that one. As a result, we started, Southampton Animal Action started themselves, I should say. And they regularly update us that they're more active, they're more effective, they're doing more than Dorset Animal Action is, which honestly is all I want to hear. I want that friendly competition. I want people to be one-up each other. I want people to be pushing themselves and doing the activism that makes them feel alive, but more importantly, makes other animals stay alive. And we're seeing that. We're seeing, again, all kinds of things. These are just 2 photos I grabbed. Their social media, Southampton Animal Action, has a lot more. They're doing all kinds of things. They're focusing on all issues of animal oppression in their community, animal agriculture, animal testing, animals in entertainment, and everything else. Being incredibly effective. And Dorset and Southampton Animal Action, we're taking part regularly in actions all over the UK, all over Europe. We joined a fur convergence, anti-fur convergence in Paris not so long ago, which is very cool. We've also done disruptions in London. We go up to MBR Acres and other places. And on the topic of MBR Acres, World Day for Animals in Laboratories, I mentioned it earlier, 23,000 people in 1992. We're a little way off that still. But what is most exciting for me, I think, that's come out of this so far, and this might feel quite tame, but for World Day in Animals in Laboratories this year, which was at MBR Acres, Bournemouth and Southampton both organised coaches, and each one of them had 50 people on, which isn't a huge number of people necessarily, but from 2 fairly small towns on the south coast, getting 100 people together, what that means and why this is exciting for me is that if every major town and city in the UK had taken 50 people, there would have been tens of thousands of people lining those quiet country lanes outside MBR Acres. And nobody can tell me that 50,000 people could not have torn those fences to the ground and liberated every single animal inside. So this is what I'm working on. This is what I hope you'll all be working on with me on. And this is the vision. This is the aim. Something I get asked a lot is about how we manage conflict and how we work together and what kind of people we let into these communities and all those kind of nitty-gritty kind of questions. And to kind of delve into that slightly, I just want to take us on a quick little history lesson. So can anyone tell me who these people are? Some of them. A third of them are Black Panthers. I know Jess knows because you've heard this before.
Rainbow Coalition.
They are the Rainbow Coalition. So the Rainbow Coalition, genuinely, this is probably one of the pieces of modern social justice history that I find most inspiring, and everybody should know this, I think. This is genuinely incredible. But the Rainbow Coalition was the brainchild of 2 Black Panthers, Bobby Lee, Fred Hampton. And these guys, they realized or recognized that the issues they were facing, or many of the issues they were facing at least in Chicago, was not the result of racism, but was the result of classism, that the same boot that was grinding their community into the ground was doing the same for every other working class community in Chicago. And so what they did is they decided to start an alliance. Now, the first part of this I don't think is so mind-blowing. I think it's a very logical and strategic step. They aligned with a group called the Young Lords. Now, the Young Lords were a former Latinx street gang who had essentially reformed into a civil rights movement fighting for Latinx representation in Chicago. Now, that makes a lot of sense, right? The Black Panthers working with the Young Lords. What is truly, genuinely mind-blowing, incredible to me is the next group that joined this coalition. What made it a Rainbow Coalition was these guys, the representatives from the Young Patriots. Now, the Young Patriots were second-generation Appalachian, in their own words, rednecks, who had moved to Chicago looking for work and had found none. Amongst their members were outspoken racists. Their logo was the Confederate flag. But they sat down with these 2 men, they had this conversation, about a vision for a united working class in Chicago and what that would mean for true, meaningful change. And they agreed. And they joined this coalition. They became an anti-racist organization. And every single time the Black Panthers in Chicago gave a press conference, they stood by their side. Every time the Young Patriots stood up to give a speech, the Black Panthers would stand beside them. And I just want to be so clear. If these groups can work together, there is not a single person in this room or our movement who cannot do the same. But we also need to be clear that this worked because the Young Patriots were willing to listen, to grow, to learn, to become better people in order to make a better society for themselves and their communities. And it worked because the Black Panthers and the Young Lords were willing to give them the space, the respect to do that. And this is how we grow. This is how we build a truly mass movement where everyone has a place within it. We respect each other, we grow together, we stand up for each other, we look out for each other, we support each other, and just like these guys did, we stand side by side on the front lines, fighting for liberation. Now, that's exciting. Another history lesson. Okay, I'm not coming to you because you know this again, but these ladies or these women, does anyone know who they might represent? This is an easier one for sure. They do have guns. They are part of the French resistance, part of a much wider trans-European resistance movement, a very well-studied, well-known period of history. The reason this is important, I feel, is because it really shows us how people organize when they have to organize, how ordinary members of the public, like you and I, organize when there's no choice but to organize. And the way they do it is exactly the same as what I've just said. Within their communities, they build trust, they build relationships, they build a network where they can operate in the way that they feel is going to achieve change. There's no top-down structure. It's all coming from the community up. They were incredibly effective. We talked earlier about whether it's 3.5%, 14% that makes a difference through social activism. Less than 2% of the French public were involved in the resistance. But 80% of the intelligence used to plan the D-Day landings came from the resistance movement. So while the D-Day landings wouldn't have happened without the well-funded, well-trained, well-organized Allied forces, it couldn't have happened without the ground-up community organizing grassroots activism of the resistance. And one quick little thing on this, before I get too far off topic with it all, but what I think is very important to know, these are two very different resistance groups. The Army of Crime, active in Paris, the White Rose, active in Berlin, took radically different strategies, radically different theories of change. The Army of Crime, as the name suggests, were happy to blow up trains. They assassinated German soldiers. The White Rose, on the other hand, deplored violence, they spoke out against violence, they simply printed leaflets, propaganda leaflets, to educate the people of Germany, to educate their fellow students. They handed them out. Both of these groups were arrested by the German regime. Both groups were executed, were beheaded. They all met the same fate. It didn't matter what their strategy or theory of change was. And while we often see these wild differences between different groups and organizations, and none so varied as these differences, the state, the forces we stand against, they do not see the differences. So I'm moving on from history now to what is happening now. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about the present and what each of us can do to try and build back this network of grassroots organizing. So the Animal Freedom Network, I'm not going to ask if anyone's heard of it in case there's just a resounding silence, but we have started the Animal Freedom Network. Now this is, and eventually, hopefully at least, is going to be an autonomous space where we can see this network start to grow, these local groups, these local communities forming, taking their own autonomous action, being part of something much bigger. And so we have a website, animalfreedom.org.uk. Please check it out. It has a lot of things. It has a map. There's a lot more pins now than there was when we when I made this slide. But we're building this coalition so you can find local groups. I'd really love to see more in Scotland, in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, elsewhere in Scotland. I know there's things happening, so please reach out to us, talk to us. If you have a group that already fits this kind of model, this community model, then please let me know. We'll add you to the map. We also have a resource library, and I think this is something every activist should be checking, whether you're an animal rights activist or anything else. We have a whole library we're building of guides that take you from everything from setting up a local group, organizing protests, fundraising. The rest of it, there's, I think, over a dozen guides already and counting. If you go on there and there's not a guide that you wish was there, let me know. If you read one, you think it needs updating, let me know and I can update it. We want these to be as helpful as possible. They're all free, obviously. We want people to better use this knowledge so that every single one of us has as much knowledge and as much power as we can possibly have. I have over on the table next to my book, is that the third shameless plug? We have a copy of the local group organizing guide. So if you're interested in this, if you already have a local group and you're interested in seeing what we're doing, or you think about starting one or anything else, please come and grab a guide. Again, all free. And yeah, we can chat. That would be very cool. And again, as part of this, now I know a lot of this is a long way from here, but then I guess so am I, a long way from home. But we are looking to, essentially, what we want is to see as many local organizers as possible. And we want to build that autonomy. We're not looking at growing a cult or anything like that. We just want every individual to have the power and the knowledge to be able to do what they want to do, how they want to do it. And to do that, we're organizing a bunch of physical trainings. The first on the 26th of October, way down on the south coast. Then in March, we're doing one. I know it says Northern, that's probably controversial here, but it's in Harrogate, so you will have to cross the wall to get there. And then we're doing one in the Midlands down in Birmingham next June. And then we're building to a national gathering, which is going to be down in the Northampton kind of area next September. Now, each of these events, what they're looking to do, it's not going to be me standing on a stage talking at you. It's going to be practical hands-on workshops where we learn how to deal with the media, how to make placards, how to make wheat paste and go fly posting, how to organize a protest, how to organize pressure campaigns, things that hopefully will mean you will leave these with new knowledge, new ideas, inspired, network to people. We will be doing a Scottish one as well at some point. And so each of these are a day. The National Gathering is going to be a 3-day event where we all come together, we Skillshare, we learn, and hopefully we start weaving those networks and building that knowledge for us to become that mass movement for change. And that is me, Dan. I'm sorry if I spoke too quickly. I did a talk at Vegan Camp Out a few weeks ago, and they cut me to like 20 minutes or something, and I spoke really quickly, and I feel that's kind of got PTSD from that, so I apologize. But yes, I'm open to questions now if people have questions. I'm not sure who the microphone person is.
Hi there. How do we transmigrate global economies to an organic whole foods, plant-based agricultural food system or an organic, veganic agricultural food system when the planet's economy is built on animal exploitation?
I'm not sure if that directly relates to building a local community, a grassroots community, but I feel for whatever we're campaigning on, if we have a strong local community network, then we're going to be a lot more powerful for any campaigns. And if there's campaigns that you're interested in and want to use this network to benefit that, then it's there for everyone.
Have you changed farmers to turn them into veganic or organic farming agriculture industries, or?
That's not something I've ever done. I've closed farms down. I've never followed through on helping them transition, but that's a really important part of our movement for sure.
Yeah, it's just because if the farmers are closed down, if they want to become vegan and transmigrate to an organic plant-based agricultural food system, and they want to grow plants, And you've shut them down. How do they go about that if you've closed them down and they're
So the ones we've closed, they've either become industrial estates or they've become like glamping sites, things like that. But there are organisations, obviously, like Vegan Support the Farmers, like Stock Free Farming, like Mercy for Animals, that are focused on this specifically, and they would be way better positioned to talk about that.
All right, okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you for your talk. It was incredible, as usual. I had a question about whether you've noticed any resistance towards becoming an activist among animal advocates due to fear of legal repercussions. Do you sense that there is more of a hostile, that because now there's more of a sense of a very hostile climate, like globally and from police, that people are maybe just scared of being arrested, or is that maybe not something that's changed from your perspective?
I mean, it's definitely like universally worse, I would say, certainly in the UK at the moment. It's an interesting thing, I think, for me, because the reason we lost these grassroots groups in the first place, which I think is probably an important thing to cover, which I didn't mention, is because in the early 2000s, there was a very effective, impactful direct action pressure campaign aimed at closing Europe's largest animal testing laboratory, which was the reason I went to prison for being involved in that campaign. And a lot of other people were. One of my friends received an 11-year prison sentence for what she still views as running a lawful protest campaign. I received 5 years, and this was back in 2010. So in some ways, it's not new. But what that did was it was unprecedented, I think, in many ways at the time. And it did chill the movement to the point that a lot of these local groups stopped out of fear. And that's something I think the movement in some ways is still recovering from, and is very much why we're trying to rebuild this now, because we need that resilience, and part of this brings in that resilience. For sure, I think it's always been the case that people are scared of going to prison. I think another little history lesson, and this is again a fact that kind of blew my mind a little bit, there was only one suffragette that got a prison sentence more than 3 months, and hers I think was only 6 months. I say only, they were obviously violently force-fed. Their prison sentences, I'm sure, were far worse than mine. But in terms of length, many of them were able to go to prison for like 2-3 weeks, come out and keep doing what they were doing. Now, when you have people going to prison for 4 years for like suspending themselves from a bridge or whatever else, obviously that creates an inherent concern. I think what's very important is that as part of our activism, we know the risks we're taking, we understand them, we learn what laws might be relevant to what we're doing. Did I go the wrong way? So part of what we're doing, like 2 of the guides we've done, one is what to expect if you get arrested. I have a lot of experience in that I'm able to share in there, but also a legal guide, which literally goes through every law you're likely to encounter while doing activism, and it as a kind of flow diagram, like, are you doing this, yes or no, and then it will take you to whether you might be breaking the law or not. But I think it's really, I would recommend everyone has a copy of that. It would be a lot to internalize in one go, but if you have that with you, or even print it out and take it on protest with you, it will help build that resilience, I think, in knowing what you can and can't do. Obviously, we don't control what the police do. Obviously, they can just arrest people, whatever. But we can also still sue them and take legal action after the event. So yeah, it is an issue. I think if we understand the law, we know when we're putting ourselves at risk or not. And I think that's a really important thing. I think being arrested is one of the most radicalizing things that can happen. But that doesn't mean that I think everyone should necessarily dive into that, because it carries risks. It's not safe. Like I got arrested by accident the first time I got arrested. I mean, I threw a brick through a window, but I didn't think I was going to get arrested. I thought doing it at night with a balaclava was safe. I didn't realize I was under surveillance. But so that came as a big shock when I was 18 to be in that situation. I'm kind of glad it came out of the blue, because I don't know if I'd have had the confidence to step in a situation where I might get arrested if that hadn't happened. So I do think we need to be really strong in supporting each other. Firstly, in knowing, like letting people know the risks and being okay with people's comfort levels. Like being arrested is not a necessity of being an activist at all. And I think we need to let people know what is safe and what they can step into and what the thresholds are there. But then if people are arrested, we need to be there. We need to be waiting when they're released. We need to be giving them support if they like lose their job, if they're struggling with family relations. We need to build those networks again. If people do end up in prison like I did, like back then we had a really strong prison support network. I was receiving, like one Christmas, I got a whole bin bag full of Christmas cards. And I'm not sure if that's still the case. So I think we really need to build that back in as well. Like that support for each other, not just in terms of arrest or prison, but just as a movement. Like, we need to be checking on each other. We need to be there for each other and giving people that confidence and trust that we can take those next steps however we take them, I think.
So, thank you. Okay.
Hi, Tom.
Hello.
I guess my question was kind of relating to what Abby's already asked. It was more about like the biggest threats to these local groups. I guess you've kind of covered the law side. I was wondering if you could specifically speak a little bit about like infighting, how to manage it, and how we can make sure it doesn't erode the strength of these local groups, because I'm sure we've all experienced it, we all continue to experience it, and from my experience, it's like a really big issue in like just community building. So yeah, I wonder if you could just speak a little bit about your experience of that and any tips you have for managing it in the local group context.
Absolutely, and you started that by saying what our biggest threats are, and I think our single biggest threat is ourselves, for sure. There is a new guide we've just put up that isn't on here because, again, the slide's a bit old, but it kind of goes into some of this. It's about how to manage conflict, about how to manage finances, communication, how to build your team in a kind of organic but effective way. And accountability and roles and all those kind of things. If people are interested, if you've set up your local group and you either have concerns around this or you have active ongoing issues around this, I would recommend reading that guide and hopefully there's things in there that can help. If people have gone through this, again, we are very open to learning and growing. I think the single biggest thing I think for me is communication. I think in-person meetings, like we're way less likely to argue face-to-face. Obviously it happens, but it's way less likely face-to-face. But communication, if we are open and clear in our communication, then that tends to be a good starting point. And building, group norms and group agreements into your group from the get-go. Like, we stand for this, we don't stand for this. And then as the group grows, obviously make sure the group is involved in crafting them and keeping them up to date. But then if issues arise, if they're like directly contrary to your group agreements, if there's someone's being bullied or harassed or being oppressed in some way, then if that is against your group agreements, then it's very easy to refer back to that. I think something I was talking to someone very recently about was actually the MBR Suppliers campaign. And for those of you who are a bit aware of the background around MBR ARCS and the campaigns, there's a lot of different groups campaigning against MBR ARCS in different ways. Most of them actively hate each other, to the point there's been like physical confrontations and stuff. But the MBR Suppliers campaign, we went into it with a very clear set of rules, very clear this is what we're about. And if people don't follow those rules, their posts get deleted immediately. And we've had some people kind of complain about it and say, you're favoring this group over this group. And it's like, no, you didn't follow the rules, they did. But we love what you're doing. We appreciate what you're doing. We respect it. We've got a lot of time for it, but just this isn't the forum for it. Have you tried these places? And talking to people with respect and trust, even if you don't agree with them, often allows collaboration and change to happen and at least an understanding. I think as well, for me, I think it's important with these communities, if we want to build a mass movement, then we can't just be trying to recruit a percentage of the, 2% of vegans, whatever it is at the minute. We should be focusing on a percentage of the 80% of self-professed animal lovers, which does mean within the communities, bringing in non-vegans, I feel, people who are opposed to greyhound racing, fox hunting, whatever else, bring them into a community that is vegan, and they will likely become vegan. And what that means is we can grow as a movement. That doesn't mean that every group within the community has to have the same policy. Like, there are certain campaigns and strategies and tactics that maybe preclude people that aren't already vegan, and that's fine. But the community itself, there's absolutely no reason we shouldn't be inviting everyone in and working together and supporting each other. I was 16 when I started Hunt Sabotage. I didn't go vegan until I was 18, and for those 2 years, I was actively hunt sabbing. I was liberating animals from farms. I was gluing up the local fishing lakes with all the fishermen inside. I was doing all kinds of direct action for 2 years without being vegan. But the community around me, I had excuses. We all have excuses, right, before we go vegan. I lived with my parents. They did all my shopping, all my cooking. I didn't feel like I could go from vegetarian to vegan at that point. I'm sure the people I was working with didn't like that, but they respected me. They could see the kind of activist I was, the kind of activist I was going to become, and they gave me the space to do that. And so all of these victories and stuff I talked about earlier, that's all because I was given that respect to that point. If I hadn't been, then maybe I'd have become an environmental activist and wouldn't be here now. So we don't need more trauma, do we? Which way are we going? That way? There we go. So that's kind of what I would say on it. And I think it is a big issue. I think we need to be kind to each other. We need to understand that although we might be walking on different paths, they're all headed in the same direction. And as long as we aren't actively harming each other or each other's campaigns, then we should stand up next to each other and support each other and cheer each other on, lift each other up when we fall, slap each other on the back when we win. And that's how we create community, and that's how we create change, I think.
Thank you.
You mentioned the report of the Oceanarium. I was just wondering, where do you look for these types of reports?
So, and again, this comes for me is that there's a lot of knowledge that is needed within this movement that I would like to see, and that's the pressure campaigning guide, for example, gives some information on this. With those inspection reports, we just did a freedom of information request to the local council, and the feeling I get is the local council don't really like it either, so they gave us a lot of information, probably more than they should have. But that's a good place to start. If there's any... I'm not 100% on freedom of information laws in Scotland as opposed to England, but certainly for us, if there's any kind of council or government or public body connection, you can ask them for data. We can't ask the Oceanarium for data, but the inspection reports we can get from the council. And that should be the same for most public bodies. But then, there's a lot of, and there is a guide I want to make on researching, because there's a lot you can get out of the internet, out of phone calls, out of social media and various things. There's a lot of research that can be done, and a lot of knowledge, I think, that's been maybe lost or just isn't known at this point. But yeah, that's one of my specialist subjects, I think, is researching stuff. So very happy to kind of chat if you have something specific you're interested in after.
Do you find it's more difficult to try and recruit people for a cause for less than convenient animals? Like, of course, people can sympathize with puppies or kittens or chicks, but you also get animals like your insects and your reptiles that they usually find kind of icky. I just want to know if it's...
Absolutely. And, a lot of my focus is on this trying to build a mass movement idea. And in doing that, I have been, and historically, I think a lot of the grassroots have been selectively speciesist. The vivisection argument at the minute is focused on dogs. And why? Because 60%, I think, of the UK have dogs, or certainly a high percentage of the UK have dogs, and certainly a higher percentage have a positive connection with dogs, they're their man's best friend and all that. And that's a very easy way to get the public engaged in these issues. And for me, say somewhere like ARCS, it's a factory farm for dogs. And you tell people that and they're horrified. Why are they horrified? Not just because it's dogs, but it's a factory farm for dogs. Because factory farms are bad. And let's talk about why factory farming is bad. And you can actually bring a lot of people in that way, I think, if you're kind of strategic with it. It is speciesist. I'm very open with that. Focusing on fur rather than skins, it's speciesist, but you're more likely to get people in. But what I would say, going way back to what I said at the beginning, in terms of making sure we have a local community that welcomes everyone in, there are people that see something happen to an insect on I'm a Celebrity, for example, as was discussed earlier. We have people who love reptiles that see something horrible happening in a reptile shop or whatever it might be. People, their trigger moments are very different, and those people should also be very welcome into our movement to have a space where they can campaign on these issues, because they are just as important. For sure, they're just as important. Every animal is important. Everyone deserves a fight and a life. But it is harder.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for your talk, and thanks for answering so many of our questions. So I'd like to ask you about infiltration, because this was a big thing back when you were in the movement at the beginning, right? The spy cops scandal and cops misleading activists, particularly women, misleading them into long-term relationships, sexually abusing them. So I'm concerned both about police infiltration, but also about the fear of police infiltration and incorrect beliefs that there is infiltration happening can be just as damaging as real infiltration. And, of course, you mentioned the Black Panthers, who were also dismantled by police infiltration. So is there anything we can do about this?
Yes, I think there's things we can do about both of those things. I was trying to get back to it, although one of the slides actually has the reason that I was arrested for throwing the brick through the window of the McDonald's, which was a police informant. But that doesn't matter. You don't need to see his horrible face. But I'm a named victim in the undercover policing inquiry because we were heavily infiltrated, of course. You did just remind me of something I didn't mention when I was talking about the Rainbow Coalition. It's just how effective that was. It was so effective that the FBI kicked down Fred Hampton's door and shot him dead in his bed because they were so scared about the idea of these movements pulling together. A little bit off topic, but you did just remind me of that. So what can we do about infiltration? I mean, it's a hard one. Like, the reason I got a 5-year prison sentence was because a police informant created a case against us and set us up and framed us and basically got us that prison time. It's a huge risk we face. I think where we are, the animal rights movement specifically, at the moment, I don't think we're high enough on anyone's radar that that's likely to happen anytime soon. If we're honest with ourselves, I think Palestine Action and Just Stop Oil groups like that are probably far more at risk at this moment. Let's try and change that. One of my friends once said, if we don't have prisoners, we stop fighting. And yeah, we're kind of there, aren't we? So what we can do about it is being aware of the signs that someone might be working for the police or a police officer. I think what we've learned from the Spy Cops stuff, there's some very clear signs that people might be working in that industry. Often, I think the signs that we kind of assume will be there, it's not that. Like, these people literally move into your life. Like, I've had police informants living in my house. And it's not like they sneak off and go back to their other life. Like, they become part of your community. So sometimes it's the best local activists rather than the worst one. And actually throughout some of the Spy Cops inquiries show me is a lot of the best actions that our movements had were actually either carried out by or participated in by undercover cops. So for all the fucking disgusting shit they've done, sometimes I think maybe we owe them a little bit of thanks for that. But I think what we need to be careful of, and like I say, I don't think we're in that position yet where we need to be overly paranoid about it, but I think we need to be careful of becoming overly paranoid about it. I think what we need to be doing, and what I'm talking about, is creating spaces where everyone is welcome into this space, as long as they aren't causing harm to others. I think if we have suspicions around certain individuals, then we can protect spaces within our community. But I think the community itself, unless we have very specific reasons to believe someone is a cop or an informant or an industry spy or whatever it might be, then I think we need to be open to people and approach people. Because I've known a lot of people that people have thought are dodgy or thought of cops, and I know they're not. I know they're not. And it causes a lot of damage, it causes a lot of harm, and yeah, I think often the people that turn out to be are people that people didn't suspect at the time at all. So I think we just need to understand that people people have different, neurospiciness, or they have personal trauma, or they come from a background that isn't versed in activist etiquette or security culture, and they can kind of say things or do things that other people think aren't right. I just think we need to be alive to that and just be compassionate with people, give people the space to exist. But yeah, if there's nothing we should be doing within these communities that should put us at risk overtly. If we want to do those things, then let's do them the way we've always done them, in a sensible way that we can put a kind of wall up between us and potential threats.
Thanks.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for the talk. It's amazing. How do you deal with the conflict of welfareism versus abolitionism in already existing community, and if that's there are founding members who are not agreeing on, doing this grassroots kind of movement? How do you deal with that kind of issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think this can be a really difficult one, and it's something I'm kind of having a lot of energy put into at the moment. I think, this is kind of hard without me going too much into what I think on specific things. I think what we're trying to create with this network and this community is autonomous spaces where people choose the campaigns they want to get involved with. So within that community, like, I feel anyone should be able to come and pitch their campaigns, explain why it's important, explain what they want people to do, and then it's up to those local communities to decide if collectively or individually they want to get behind that campaign. I think that's very firmly where I stand. I have quite strong views on things around this argument. Maybe I'll get into them, maybe I shouldn't, I don't know. But that's not, to me, important. Like, I don't have all the answers, I don't know everything. I want to create spaces where people can come and decide for themselves as a community what they think is best, whether that's strategy or tactics, theories of change. So I'm not going to tell anyone they should do corporate welfareism, they shouldn't do corporate welfareism, they should do direct action, they shouldn't do direct action. Like, find the tactics, the strategies that work for you, that speak to you. I do personally have issues, sorry Jez, you're going to hate this. I do personally have issues with the idea of the radical flank of our movement, the energy from that being taken to ask for a way lower demand than the radical flank has traditionally asked for, just based on the history of social justice. Every single movement that's been successful, you have a radical flank making a demand up here, and then you'll have liberals, moderates, whatever, welfarists coming in down here, and then industry kind of like, as the Overton window, public pressure kind of shifts towards the radical flank, you kind of get up towards the welfare thing, and then you can shift these up to the radical demand. If you take the radical demand right down here, that is the ceiling of your movement. And I think what we have seen, I think, again, I have a lot of respect for everyone, whatever type of activism they're doing. This is just personal opinion. I think yesterday, ICOR released their strategy, their campaign strategy around the cage-free eggs situation. And what they're really saying is that for 10 or so years, they've been demanding cage-free commitments. They've got loads of cage-free commitments, it's a big success, but then it's not being followed through on, and I really hope I'm not speaking for their voice, but it seemed that they've kind of acknowledged that that didn't really work as a strategy. So now what they're doing is they're trying to take that grassroots energy and use that to secure these these commitments. But for me, it feels that if you're kind of recognized, because if you're going in at this ask that is a lower ask because it's an easy win and you've kind of failed at that, if you're then switching your strategy into a radical strategy, then for me, it's probably time to just take a moment and think, do we need a more radical ask? And that's just my personal opinion. I know Jess is desperate to come back on what I just said. But all of that aside, that's just my personal opinion. I strongly feel that everyone should have access to this community. We're not gatekeeping any of this. This is like, we want local power, local autonomy. If people want to get behind these campaigns, 100% get behind these campaigns. Whew.
Thank you very so much. I wanted to ask this another talk earlier, but you've brought it up as well, so I'll ask it here. The criticism of welfareism is that they don't ask enough. And I agree, like, I'm an abolitionist. When I speak to individuals, I'll always ask for veganism and abolition. But what is the radical ask you can make of a supermarket? Like, what would you suggest?
So, firstly, my criticism isn't the ask itself. My criticism is making that the radical ask of the movement. I think welfareism has a place within our movement, for sure, and there's a lot of welfare campaigns that I think will take us in steps towards where we need to be. I think my concern is, for example, doing a disruption where I'm running into a company, and again, this is very me personally, like, I don't feel comfortable either myself or encouraging other people to run into a company, cause a disruption that is putting myself and potentially others at risk, either of arrest or physical confrontation, in order to ask someone to change their egg supplier. Like, personally, that's just not something I'm interested in. I think if we're talking very specifically, and I think it's a very good question, because I think we often stand up here and talk about what's wrong and not about what we should do. For me, it just feels a little disingenuous to the animals, but also to our movement, that we feel that that is the best we can ask for, where my experience is we can close places down. We can close down hatcheries, we can close down slaughterhouses, we can close down farms. So if we're taking that radical stance and doing these radical actions and going at a radical mindset with the idea, and again, this is something I call fully agree on, is we need to be going to this with the mindset we're going to win, right? If you're doing that, then fucking win. Close down a hatchery, close down an abattoir, close down a farm, and then do it again and again and again until there's none left. Like, that's my personal view. And again, building this kind of local community thing, hopefully there'll be local communities focused on these issues and we will get to that point. We are a very small movement. Again, I don't have all the answers. I might be absolutely wrong, and I'm very happy to be, I hope I'm proven wrong on all of this. But yeah, that's just my personal take on it.
My only retort would be that, like, if we say there is no radical ask for a supermarket, then we just leave them alone. And I don't think any industry that harms animals should be left alone. And I think you'd agree with that. I had a different question, if you don't mind me changing the topic. I think you're very good at making people brave. I think you have a really good talent for making people brave. And I think bravery is one of the things that holds back a lot of activists. They just don't think they can do things. So I would just ask you, to anyone in this room who doesn't feel that they're brave enough to do the things that you do, what would you say to them?
I didn't wake up one morning with a balaclava on and bolt cutters in my hands. Like, I had some of the best mentors this movement's ever had, honestly. Like, there's people I'm super, super grateful for. Like, I was really close friends with Keith Mann back in the day, and Greg Avery taught me how to run pressure campaigns. Like, my friend Don taught me a lot about running local groups. Keith obviously taught me a lot about direct action. And it was a process for me, and it's a process for anyone. I think, again, something I'm really, really keen on is, like, genuinely, like, you're right, I'm just a pleb with a megaphone. Like, there is nothing special about me. Like, I just do the stuff that I know how to do and that I think will be strategic, and I want to show as many people as possible what they can do. So when you say I show people how to be brave, I think for me a huge thing we all need is just inspiration, and we don't inspire people. Like, this is less inspirational than me taking you out and running into an office, right? Like, we need to, I hate the word leadership, but if we're going to have leaders or whatever in this movement, then we need to lead from the front. We need to be showing people how to change things and not just tell them how to change things. Like, we don't change the world from a stage, we change the world from the streets.
Sorry, I have one more. We're in a room with mostly vegan activists. I know you occasionally speak about having non-vegans in animal rights. And the importance of that. So would you mind speaking about that?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it earlier, but yeah, I don't see how we can ever be a mass movement if we don't recruit people, basically. And if we're just aimed at recruiting vegans, then we're fucked, right? Like, how are we ever going to grow above, like, a percentage of a percentage? Like, it's not going to happen. If we want a mass movement, which is what I want to see, then sometimes it means being a bit uncomfortable, and sometimes it means being kind and listening to people and being open to why people are, like, if someone's horrified by I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, or they're horrified by greyhound racing, or they're horrified by MBR acres, great, let's talk to those people, let's bring them in, let's let them campaign for the issues they care about, let's serve them vegan food, let's create a cool vegan community, let's debrief after demos at a vegan cafe, and soon enough they'll be vegan too. And then we not only build a mass movement for animal liberation, we also build a mass movement for veganism, and that works for all of us. And more importantly for the animal too. If you want to talk to me more, I'm over there. Buy my book, talk to me, grab a thing, whatever. But thank you, I love you all, and keep fighting.